Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little, and I'm here today to share with you a new program I have recently started using called PokerSnowie. And this program is effectively I guess you can call it a computer game, where you play against opponents who are playing what this program and the program's maker think to be very, very good, strong poker. And it will also tell you whenever you are making what the program perceives to be a mistake. So what I'm going to do today is I just wanted to show you how to get started with this program and how to use it to analyze your game. So the way you get started is by clicking on challenges. I've already signed up. My subscription is active. You can actually get a free month of PokerSnowie at jonathanlittlepoker.com/PokerSnowie, as you can see right here. So you can check this out for completely free for a month. And we're going to click real-time evaluation. So what we're going to do is we are going to play against 5 people, so 6-handed poker. This is going to be a cash game, meaning that we will get rebought to 100 big blinds. The stakes, it doesn't really matter what you set it at. And you can set the number of big blinds you're going to play with as well. And it's going to tell us in real time if we are making good plays or not. So here we have Queen 2 offsuit under the gun. We will fold. And right here we can click and it will tell us what should we have done. And so in this hand, it's actually telling us what we could do as well, saying we should call in this scenario. So let's take a look. We have a min raise. They fold around to us. I have 10-9 offsuit. This is a pretty clear call to me. Interestingly, I don't mind raising. Like if you told me that you were to raise in this scenario, I don't think it would matter that much. But seeing that this program says call is definitively right, it probably is. Also, it's worth mentioning that this program also shows you the equity of your lines, and that is relevant. It basically says that none of these plays are that profitable or unprofitable, but calling is clearly best. So I'm going to call, and I think this would be a spot where I'm going to be check folding a lot, and I'd be interested to see if it says that check raising is actually an acceptable play. So I think I would be folding almost always, but I also would not hate a raise to something like $6 or maybe even something like $7. And it's a spot where I don't think you should be raising too often, but seeing how this hand is, if I had something like Queen 10 instead, I'd be a little bit happier to raise. But with this, in this scenario, I think you need to fold. So as you see, it says folds, clearly the right play. Raising is actually the worst, and that's mainly because whenever we do get action, we'll be in bad shape. It also has a few raise size options. So kind of interesting that it says that a half pot raise is its recommended advice. Kind of interesting though, because a full pot raise actually shows more equity on the raise, which is kind of cool. Just cool to note. And that's probably because you're going to have more fold equity with a full pot size raise, whereas whenever you make it half pot, you're going to get called a lot, and you don't want to be getting called when you're bluffing. And also you notice the 2 times pot raise is actually the worst play, because whenever you do get called, you're just losing a ton. So here they fold to me with pocket 8s. I would definitely say raising to $3 is my standard play. As you see, it does say pot size raise is by far the best. 2x pot slightly worse, 1.5x pot slightly worse, but I think I would make this as my standard play. Opponent calls. And so now this is an interesting spot where I'm not really sure what the ideal play is. You could certainly bet or check. If I had something like pocket kings, I'd be much more inclined to check. But with something like 8s, I want to bet because I don't want to check and let like a random queen come off and let queen jack get there. So I think I do need to bet. I would probably be betting 4. Let's see what the program says. It does say 4 is the ideal size, and it says, I guess it only gives you a few bet size options. I was going to bet 2/3 pot, so slightly more than half pot. Maybe half pot's ideal. So good to see that I'm generally on the right page there. When the opponent calls, I'm not really sure what to do in this spot. I think most of his range is going to be aces and draws, and maybe 7s and 4s. So I think I have the best hand a lot, but I think if I bet and my opponent calls, I'm not going to be happy. So I think we need to check. So let's see what it says. It does say check is the best play. So what this suggests here is that we need to be checking 75% of the time and betting 25% of the time. Not exactly sure what these EVs are saying because I doubt that they are equally profitable. It says of this is pretty clear to me though. If you had to pick between 1x pot between potting it or checking it, you'd rather check. But if you have various bet sizes between checking and betting, checking is probably going to be ideal. So I check, and if the opponent bets, I imagine I'm supposed to call, but this is probably a pretty close one as well. So yeah, I think calling's pretty obviously the best play. Interesting, it says raise. I would not think raising is a good play. Yeah, interesting stuff. I guess I'm going to call. Then the plan would be to call and see what develops. We're going to be check calling the river, I believe. Although maybe check fold's the right play. I think you can go back. Maybe you can go back, maybe not. Maybe it's the only the current option. All right, so anyways, here we go. We'll raise to 3 on the button. We get 3-bet, and this is an interesting spot because I think in general we're probably supposed to 4-bet or fold, and if we 4-bet, we're 4-bet bluffing. This program, though, may suggest calling, and it may suggest calling because our hand is really good. Our hand's going to flop well enough, but I think I would tend to 4-bet this or fold, but let's see what it says. It does say call, and as you see, the difference between raise and call are fairly close. Interesting that the small raise is clearly bad. Interesting. Yeah, so, all right. I want to proceed with raise because that is what I would typically do. Although I'm not saying this is for sure the right play. I'd probably make it 23 with the intention of folding to a jam. Maybe even 20. Not 23. We'll do 23. Opponent calls. Guy checks. Not a great flop for me. This is actually a board where I think my opponent should hit this pretty well. So I don't really love betting this based on my opponent's range. That being said, I think it can never be bad to throw out a small continuation bet. So let's see what this says. It does say check sometimes, bet sometimes. If I was to bet, it would probably be, just looking at the pot size, probably about 20. And I'd be making that bet size to try to make my opponent fold every time he has nothing. And again, pick between betting bigger. You'll see that generally betting bigger, as you bet bigger, your bets become worse. And that's typically the case in No Limit Hold'em. You'll find that as you do bet large, you're just risking way too much to win too little. So I'd probably bet something like 18 if I was in this hand. And the opponent folds. So what more could he ask for? And, you know, perhaps that's the scenario where my play is overly exploitable. Because if my opponents know I'm 4-betting too wide, they can just start 5-betting a lot. Like I said, if my opponent 5-bet me in that hand, I would have folded. But I don't really know if people are doing that in general. I think that applying a lot of aggression, especially in the smaller stakes games, will be pretty good if your opponents play reasonably but are not too good against defending against extreme aggression. So here's a spot where I'm folding pretty much every time. Pretty clear fold, 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 fold. Raising, as you see, does not seem to be a small error. Or it seems to be a small error, not really a big error. Calling's also not so bad. You're going to find that whenever you're playing 100 big blinds deep, you can get away with doing reasonably whatever you want to pre-flop as long as you play well post-flop. And I think 3-betting 7-5 suited would be way too loose there, but it's still not insane. Same thing here. I could raise or fold, but I'm going to fold it pretty much every time. 9-2 offsuit's pretty easy fold. You can actually open up multiple of these tables to play at a time, which is pretty neat because I recognize that some people like to play lots and lots of tables. Remember, you can check out this program for a month for free at jonathanlittlepoker.com/PokerSnowie, so be sure to do that. Here, there's a raise. I think calling and 3-betting are both fine. So just thinking about what a program would say is probably game theory optimal, it's probably going to suggest 3-bet, but I think my typical play is to call. So, but yeah, I think I would call in the spot, although it could easily say raise. And you see, it does say that raise is significantly more profitable, right? The difference between 1.29 and 1.52 is pretty big, especially when we saw the other pre-flop decisions were, 0.01 or whatever. So clearly raise is good. And seems good across the board. Interesting that half pot re-raise, it says, is by far the best. So I'm wondering why this doesn't say to raise to this size. Kind of interesting. I would have to look into the program more. I should make it clear I'm not a professional at this program or anything like that. I'm just using it to try to find spots where I need to be a little bit more aware of my plays. And I think that as you get better in general at playing post flop, you can tend to call in these spots a little bit more. But like I said, I thought the program was going to say to raise, so we'll raise. Program does call me. It checks. Okay, so here's another interesting spot, right? I think my default would be to throw out a continuation bet just to try to pick up the pot immediately, but I don't think that checking is that bad with a gut shot and the nut high unpaired hand. So I think I would actually, I guess just me thinking like I typically would, I would probably bet this, but I would not be shocked if it said check is a good play. So as you see, the check and the bet are actually very close, right? And I think a lot of people would be surprised at this. I think that they think that checking is significantly inferior, but it doesn't seem to be that inferior. And actually, if we had to pick between pot size bet and checking, it actually suggests check. And then once you start betting huge, then yeah, you definitely want to check. So kind of interesting. And I think the takeaway from this is that betting small is pretty good. And I would probably have bet something like 8 in this scenario, because my opponent's never folding an ace, never folding a queen, and pretty much always folding everything else. I'd be folding the 7-4 offsuit pretty much every time. Program may say call, but I think we need to fold. Yeah, so it just says fold across the board. 7-4 offsuit's pretty bad. All of the worst offsuit hands, you just have no reason to play. 6-4 offsuit, again, we'll just fold. Then after we get done with this session, what we'll actually be able to do is it will go through and tell us if we made any significant blunders. And I mean, clearly I'm just skipping over the plays where I know the right play, where I know what the right play is, but if you play on this for maybe an hour or two and you don't actually check and see what the right play is, it will go back and tell you everywhere where it thinks you made a problem or made a mistake. And if the program tells you you're making, it actually classifies the types of errors you make in, like small error, reasonable error, and then blunder. If you're making a lot of blunders, clearly those are spots where you're almost certainly incorrect. Okay, so Jack 8 suited. I think we need to fold this pretty much always. I think you could also 3-bet. And as you see, you'll see this a lot in particularly in 100 big blind poker, that 3-betting's pretty strong in position. You saw that 3-betting was just slightly worse than the other play. Ace X offsuit under the gun's easy fold. Folding from early position is also very good. And you're going to find that that's even compounded way more so in nine-handed poker. And a lot of people don't really recognize that. 8-6 offsuit, we could raise or fold. We could also limp. Again, this is tough to know what the opponent's going to do. Assuming the opponent's going to be playing what it thinks is game theory optimal, we should probably just fold. And as you see, again, not much of a difference, but you'll find that if you lose 5 cents every hand, that adds up, especially if you're playing only 50 cents dollar. So we can 3-bet this or fold. Again, I think I'd probably prefer to fold, but 3-betting is acceptable. As you see, 3-betting is just barely worse, but this is actually a really cool concept that if you do 3-bet here, you are making a slightly worse play, and maybe you can make up for that with your good post-flop play, but you're taking on a huge amount of variance. I guess it's also worth mentioning that these players that I'm playing against all play as the program thinks is optimal. And that doesn't necessarily mean perfect, right? I mean, I'm sure the program has flaws in it. And just recognize that what the program's saying is maybe not perfect, but it certainly is reasonable. And if you're not making a reasonable play most of the time, you're clearly making errors. So anyways, I would have folded this in a real game against a generic player who I think is good. Actually, see, the program was saying to raise to half pot, which is 2 big blinds or 2.5 big blinds. And I typically raise to 3 big blinds with these stacks, so kind of interesting that it does suggest that. I'd be interested to see if it suggests pot size raise with deeper stacks. But I mean, clearly we're raising king, queen. That was not what I was looking at. I was more so looking at what size did they suggest, because I saw their programs were raising, or their players were raising a little bit smaller. And that is interesting to me. 8-6 suited, we'd be folding this early position pretty much always. Interesting that calling is not quite as bad. So something you can also notice here is that raising these different sizes, the pot size raise is the least bad raise of the group. And the reason for that is because you're going to get called a ton when you raise small. And when you raise huge, when you do get called, you're really unhappy. You may be surprised at how tight this thing is telling you to play, but you actually do want to play a pretty snug game in No Limit Hold'em against good players. All right, ace-9 offsuit, pretty easy call, I think. As you see, well, I say pretty clear call. It's just barely a good call, but it's a fine call. And the reason it's barely a good call is because this guy's range should be very strong from early position, and we're going to be dominated a lot. So I could see check raising or check calling being the ideal play. I think I would pretty much always check call. As we see, it's going to say check is definitely the right play. So not definitely, but pretty clearly the right play. Barely the right play. And that's because we do have a pretty strong hand. When it goes check on the flop, I think we do want to start betting with my whole range. I'd probably bet 4 in this spot. I think I have the best hand a ton, and I do want to protect to some extent. And at the same time, I don't want to bet something like 2 because then my opponent could easily call a lot of stuff, a lot of marginal stuff. And it actually does suggest potting it. And as you see, I was betting a little bit closer. Well, I was going to bet 4, right? So almost the size of the pot. It's kind of nice me going through this and seeing that most of my plays are very good compared to what the program is saying, or very close to what the program is saying. It makes me feel good about my no-limit hold'em skills. But I definitely think that there are spots where people just pick a standard bet size in all scenarios, and I think that's definitely an error. All right, 6 on the river. I think I should probably check to induce a bluff. That's what I would typically do against most people. My opponent could easily have something like 10s or jacks and a check behind the flop. He could easily have something like, I don't really know. It's kind of hard for my opponent to have a 6. He could easily have a flush and decide to check behind on the flop. That being said, if you know how your opponent plays with a huge amount of certainty, like we know this program is probably going to be betting the flop with all of his flush draws, for example, we can discount those a lot. So that means we have the best hand a ton. And that is how real poker works, even though you may think some people check behind here sporadically. I don't think, like, there are a lot of people who literally never have a flush in this scenario in my opponent's spot because he checked behind the flop. So anyways, I think I would check to induce a bluff, but I could see betting being the best play, but I'm having a hard time seeing many hands that are going to call me if I bet. So program does suggest check, and again, pretty clearly a check, which makes me happy. Interestingly, it says betting small is fine. I guess that is worth mentioning. If I did bet, I would have bet probably 5 or 6, and that is because I'm trying to get called by marginal stuff. But really, what marginal stuff is there, right? There's just not very much marginal stuff. Down the river, I think we have a pretty easy call, although the opponent did pot it, right? If the opponent... No, I mean, this just has to be a call. We beat a lot of sporadic bluffs. I don't really see what else we could do. Wow, program suggests fold. Interesting. Well, so this is kind of weird to me. I don't really understand this, and I would probably have to do a little bit more research. Also, I guess I should make it clear. If you guys like these types of videos where I do go through and play with this program, let me know. I'd be happy to make more of them in the future from time to time. If both of these plays are exactly the same EV, then you should fold because you don't want to take on variance for no good reason. But I definitely prefer calling because that makes it very difficult for your opponent to think he can run you over on a regular basis. And especially if you do play a more loose aggressive strategy, which this game doesn't really seem to suggest, I don't want my opponents... I don't want my opponents bluffing me every opportunity they have. I'd much rather them check and let me get to cheap showdowns with my marginal hands. So whatever, we're calling. Opponent shows aces, and I would be interested to see if the program even says to check aces on that flop. That seems kind of nitty, but maybe it's good. Queen 2 offsuit, we could raise or fold. I think folding's probably ideal. It says fold 94% of the time. Again, half pot raises, not good. From the small blind, it's fine to be tight whenever you are very deep stacked. 7-3 offsuit on the button, I would also fold this. Not a very good hand. Interesting check behind on 9-8, whatever. I would assume my opponent's going to be... This is also going to be a fold. I would assume my opponent's going to be betting the flop with aces every time for both value and protection. And I think the opponent actually would have won a much bigger pot if he raised pre-flop, or if he bet the flop. All right, we'll move on from that hand. Pocket threes. I think raising, or this program might suggest limping. I definitely don't like limping. Interesting, it still says fold from early position. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't really comprehend, and clearly I don't comprehend it well enough. And that is that these hands are not that great. They appear to be good, but if your opponents play well, meaning they're not going to pay you off almost blindly when you get a set, you do want to be folding these. And I know that from first, second, and third position in high stakes, no limit hold'em tournaments against good players, I just fold this pretty much every time. From the low jack seat, I'm pretty much always raising, and maybe that's a small leak in my game. I don't know. But I would pretty much always raise this hand. So let's raise. Let's see what develops. Maybe they'll punish me. No punishment. That's the thing about poker, right? Is that you can play in a manner, or you can play, and it very rarely bites you whenever you. Okay, so in that spot it said I lose like 10 cents per raise or something like that. But you don't feel it very often. Whenever you are losing those pots, it's usually just 5 or 6 big blinds at a time. So it doesn't feel that bad, and you always recognize, oh, I had the chance to win a big pot. But apparently the big pots you win against good players do not make up for the pots you lose. I would fold this. Interesting, the program says to raise. It seems like the plays are close. All plays are close. I guess this hand is perhaps slightly better than I think it is. I'm not a fan of King 9 in general, but apparently King 9 suited is acceptable. I would have folded this mainly because I was in such early position. I think this is probably a check fold against a good player with a good range. He's going to have a heart a lot of the time, and he's not going to fold. He's going to have a lot of just random pairs he's not going to fold. So I think if I bet this, I need to be barreling, but I don't really think I want to barrel. So I think I'd be checking. As you see, it looks like checking and giving up is just the right play. So I check, opponent bets, now we fold pretty much every time. So I don't really understand this either. It says its best advice is to raise 2x pot. Or it put me on this page. Maybe this is irrelevant. But because this seems to be the worst of the raise sizes. But clearly fold's fine. I have to figure out the intricacies of the program. But like I said, I am new to it. And I wanted to show you guys how someone playing on this program brand new would actually function, because I imagine that's what most of you are. Again, if you want to try this program for absolutely free, you can go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/PokerSnowie and try it out. So clear raise. Maybe we need to be min raising. I don't know. I mean, min raising is probably great. With deeper stacks, I in general think you want to be raising. I mean, if you take a look at this, right? If assuming these numbers are accurate, which maybe they are, maybe they aren't, min raising is 0.55 big blinds profit, which is huge. This is 0.34 big blinds. So clearly min raising is significantly better. And perhaps it is. So maybe our main concern is not to build huge pots or have the opportunity to build a huge pot. Maybe the play is just min raise, get action, and then play after the flop. And I mean, I've been preaching that for forever. I actually had an article in Card Player about it where a lot of amateur players say something to the effect of you want to get heads up with your aces. And that's just blatantly not true. And it definitely carries down to all of your other hands as well. Playing after the flop is a very good thing if you can do it better than your opponents. That being said, I'm playing against robots that supposedly played nearly perfectly, so maybe that's not the case. Ace Queen, we could probably bet this. I think I would tend to bet. Checking's okay too, but I would tend to bet. And it says they're roughly equal. I would have bet, half-ish pot or so. I think I would have gone 3.5 if I was trying to pick a number. So 3.5 is what I would have done. We get raised. Now we have a pretty easy fold, I think. Seeing how snug the program is suggesting I play, I think you could actually get away. I would fold this every time. You might actually get away with playing overly aggressive against this. I would suggest you try that and see what happens. Against games that aren't... I mean, this thing hasn't suggested bluffing yet, right? So what that makes me think is it's playing a primarily value-centric game. Like right here, I would love for it to tell me to bluff, but I don't think it is. Small blind limps checks the flop. I mean, I'm not bluffing here, but maybe betting is fine. And you do see that it suggests checking. It says betting is at least acceptable. As you see again, when you're bluffing, betting huge is almost never good. So check. If opponent checks again, I think we do need to start betting. And it does suggest a bigger bet, which I'm not really sure is necessary. I would have done 1.5. And I would expect to pick it up a lot. When the opponent calls on this turn, I think I need to bet again on the river, but I'm not really happy about it. The reason I'm not happy about it is because we check behind the flop, so it doesn't look like I have a jack or a 10 very often, and I'm probably not going to value bet a 6. So maybe betting is unrealistic, but I think I need to bet with what's effectively the nut low. And I'm glad I said bet, because I was not sure the program would say bet. It says to pot it. I think I would have gone something like 4 in this scenario, so slightly less than pot. But opponent does call with a 6, and probably a good call. 10-8 suited. Interesting spot. I'm definitely tighter than most people in the small blind, and I think that's probably a fine play. But yeah, I don't know what I think I would typically fold this or 3-bet it, but I could see calling being fine. Like, I really don't know what the right play is. And as you see, the program does just suggest fold. And I think that's good. And seeing it say fold makes me feel pretty good about my game. All right, so I'm going to fold this, and then I'm going to pull up the statistics page, and we're going to see if I made any sort of legitimate blunders. So let's see. I'll try to do this on camera. So we close this. Do you really want to quit? I do. Within a few minutes, your session will appear in the import manager for further analysis. All right, here we go. All right, so I gave it a minute. We click here on the import. Let me show you. We click right here on the import. Now we click this. Now I believe we click view analysis. And then it brings up how we did. It says error rate 1.94. I believe this is 1.94%. And here it shows you generally how you're doing. Apparently this side is good. This side is bad. It said we played at extraterrestrial level, which is pretty good. So we actually had no blunders, unfortunately. And let's click on errors. Let's see if this does anything. All right, so here's an error, right? And I said that I would tend to 4-bet this. And I 4-betted it to roughly, I guess this is the amount I did. I did 4-bet in this scenario to this amount. So that is one of the errors I made. And remember, whenever we were going through it, I actually talked about this one a little bit. Then we can click here, go to the next error. Again, I said that I thought I should raise, but it says fold, and folding could just be the right play. And, oh, interesting, right? Okay, so I didn't even notice this one. And this is where I think this program's really going to shine for a lot of people. Well, so maybe it's not going to shine that much. Just looking at this, I decided to check this like a no-brainer check. And it says raising to $3, which is pot, is a touch better than checking. As we see, raising smaller is not good. I was going to say, I bet raising bigger is probably not as bad in this spot because you don't mind if your opponent folds. But interesting that actually it says raising is slightly better. So I think it's important to realize what errors you're looking at and if they are that detrimental. And like this error, if it costs 1 penny, is not that detrimental, right? Whereas perhaps that error is probably also not that detrimental, but this one probably is, right? And you have to be aware that maybe 4-betting in this scenario is drastically worse than calling the 3-bet. And if you can find a lot of spots like that, that will be incredibly beneficial to you. So if I click on the analysis tools, we can actually click right here. And I think it'll bring up the player's range, or its at least perceived range. And as you can see, it actually goes through and tells you the hands that it suggests to 3-bet, which is kind of cool, right? I can look at this scenario, and this program will tell you what should you be doing with these. And as you can see, it says 3-bet queen-9 suited sometimes, right? 3-bet king-9 suited sometimes. The other times it's going to be call. 3-bet king-jack offsuit sometimes. So rather interesting that it says that. As you can see, it says 3-bet all of the pairs. Well, 5s and better. I suppose it's going to say either call or fold with the 2s and 3s. I don't even know. So that's sort of interesting. Also, it lists our general hand strength. Like 1 is, I guess, even, but 2 is really, really good, like the super nuts. So a few other little things you can do with that as well. So then back to the statistics page, you can click on this. It says your profit, et cetera, et cetera. Interesting that our showdown profit was negative. Our non-showdown was positive. This is actually how my typical cash game graph looks, where you have what's called a red line in a cash game graph on Hold'em Manager, and that tells you how much money you're winning without showdowns. And you'll find that most good players have either their showdown winnings or their non-showdown winnings goes up. Very rarely are they both going up, although it does happen sometimes. But if you're playing a more loose aggressive strategy, your non-showdown winnings are going to be the ones going up most of the time. So all 3 of my errors, and this small sample were pre-flop, but it will actually let you know where you are making errors. Balance. I don't know about this balance. Let's see what balance says. Oh, that brings up a web page. They actually have a lot of statistics on their, or a lot of information on their website about the various things that we are looking at. So definitely check out PokerSnowie site. Talks about playing stats. Here's our VPIP preflop raise. Interesting that mine is right near it for the 33 hand sample. aggression factor, I'm more aggressive than PokerSnowie, which could be a leak. It really could be. So that's good to know. Then opponents were playing tighter than me, and I don't know why that was. Probably just because of a small sample size, though. So anyways, that is one very short session played on PokerSnowie. You can get a month of this free by going to jonathanlittlepoker.com/PokerSnowie, PokerSnowie, or you can actually use the promo code JLPoker whenever you go and sign up. So definitely check this out. If you like this video, if you like me going through my hands and seeing if I'm doing anything wrong, definitely let me know about that in the future. And there are also ways to import your hands from PokerStars or Full Tilt or various other websites. So you don't even have to play on this program. You can just import your hands and it will still find the things it perceives for you to be errors. So definitely check this out, PokerSnowie. I think it's a great tool. And now that I am finished with my book, Excelling at No Limit Hold'em, I'm going to have some free time. So I'm going to be spending some time playing around on this. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you like this, and please share it with your friends. This has been Jonathan Little for JonathanLittlePoker.com. I'll talk to you guys next time.